All right, everybody, welcome back to the number one television program in the history of the entire universe. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown. All three books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today I'm going to be reviewing Comes the Blind Fury by John Saul. This is a horror novel. It's the fourth book that he wrote. We're reading and reviewing all the John Saul books in order of publication. I think there's maybe 30 of them that I'm going to be reading and reviewing. I've not read any John Saul except for the first three that he wrote before this one. This one came out in 1980, and as we can see by the cover, it's got a very 1980s-esque sort of cover look to it with a weird painting. Not really sure if I'm that jazzed about some of the early book covers of the John Saul books, but whatever. So this book is very similar to the third book that he wrote, which was something about the strangers, Suffer the Strangers, or I can't remember what it was. But it starts out about the same. There's a girl that in the past, like 100 years ago, a girl dies mysteriously. In this book, the girl happens to be blind, and she dies mysteriously. She's tortured and bullied by the kids in school, and she's either pushed off a cliff or falls off a cliff. Or anyway, is she murdered or not? But anyway, her body ends up in the sea. That's where the prologue goes. Then we get to the main story, which takes place, in the same kind of town. Well, it's the same town, same neighborhood, almost the same house that the girl lived in, the blind girl. That's why it's called Comes the Blind Fury. This is a very similar setup to the previous book of John Saul's that I read. This town is called Paradise Point, and a new family is moving into Paradise Point. In the third book, the book number 3 that I read of John Saul, there's a murder of a little girl, and a new family moves into a new town, and the house is haunted, yada, yada, yada. This is kind of the same story exactly. Paradise Point, along the East Coast. Book number 3 took place on the West Coast. And there's a few differences. But anyway, family moves into town. There's the dad, Cal, the mom, June, and a young girl named Michelle who they've adopted. Adopted as a baby, of course. So Michelle knows she's adopted. Adoption themes run strong through this book, which is kind of what kept me interested, because if you followed my channel for any time, or if you've read my books, I mention in the foreword of these books that I'm adopted, that I sympathize with the orphan bastard farm boy trope, like Luke Skywalker, who doesn't know his real parents and this, that, yada, yada. All of the Randall Thors and Shay Omsfords and Jon Snows. I like those kind of characters. I know they're cliche, but I'm a fucking cliche. So who gives up? Anyway, okay, so let's get back to this movie. This is not movie, it's a book. Maybe it was made into a movie, I don't know. Anyway, they move into the new town. Cal, his wife June, adopted daughter Michelle. And the reason they're moving to the new town is because Cal was a surgeon or a doctor in Boston, and he kind of up and somebody died. And he's like, it's a medical mistake. He wants to start a new life because he's tortured by this medical mistake. And he's kind of recruited to come work in this small town of Paradise Point by a gentleman named Josiah, who is sort of the family practitioner in this town, where all of the townspeople go to see him for their medical needs. And so Josiah sort of says, hey, come work in this town. I need to sell my house. I need to downsize my house. I don't need this big house anymore. I'll sell it to you for cheap. You can come take over my business, my practice. And, you can, absolve yourself of your sins in Boston, where you clearly fucked up your medical practice there, and start a new life. And so that's what happens. That's why the new family is here. Well, Michelle, the adopted girl, ends up in a new school, and a lot of the stuff is revolving around young Michelle, the adoptive girl, and the problems that she has. Well, at first she doesn't. She loves her parents. But the little kids at the school, they start to kind of pick on her because they find out she is adopted. And they kind of start to say, your real mommy and daddy didn't want you. That's why they gave you. And they just need, and then she starts to believe it. And then at the same time, she finds this mysterious, weird doll in the house that her parents have bought from the previous owner, the Josiah the doctor. This weird doll. And then with this doll, there's almost like a ghost figure, which of course the ghost figure is the blind girl that was killed 100 years ago. And she's seeing this ghost figure. And she can tell that the ghost figure is all blind. You can see the eyes are like all buggy and shit. Anyway, this is the ghost she sees. The doll is acting weird. The house is creepy. She's having trouble with her school friends because they're picking on her. And all hell breaks loose from there. I won't tell you what happens, but this is a good little horror novel about a child turned demonic and everybody trying to just get out of the way. Anyway, so I don't know. This one really reminded me, like I said, of another John Saul I just recently read. The third book that I read of his. Comes the Stranger, Welcome the Strangers. Stranger something. I can't remember what it was. I've got them all over here. I could probably just... got the entire John Saul collection over here. It's Cry for the Strangers. Cry for the Strangers. That's what it is. I knew the word strangers was in there. So I'm going to give Comes the Blind Fury, the fourth book in the John Saul collection. I'm going to give it a solid 7.5 out of 10.